Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in for a special update episode of Crime Over Wine. I am back again with the one, the only Michelle Herron. Hello, Michelle.
Hi.
So we are both drinking wine, obviously. Michelle did have to remind me, but a little twist of fate there. But we are back dropping into your feeds because we have a special update episode on a case that Michelle and I brought you a couple weeks ago. It is episode 11. It's the Stephen Smith episode. So much has happened since we dropped this, and literally to the point where the episode drops, Michelle, and we were talking back and forth, and we were like, oh my goodness, why couldn't this have happened literally week before, and we would have had all this stuff in here. So we have a lot to talk about, Michelle, and I know that you have a lot to say, I have a lot to say, so let's just dive into it, huh?
I know. I mean, anyone who is a crime junkie and when you start seeing updates on cold cases, it gets so exciting, and that's literally what we've been like.
Yeah. Especially
this one.
Oh yeah, because we've talked about this so much, but it's so heartbreaking, the way that this young man was done in, from start to finish. But finally some justice is happening, so let's dive into some justice, right? So first things first, pretty much right off of the bat, as soon as we uploaded the episode, as soon as it dropped, the family announced that they had raised enough money, unsurprisingly, because everyone cares about this case at this point, to have his body exhumed officially. And so that officially happened. Stephen had a second autopsy done down in Florida. The results, though, were not disclosed 100% publicly, so we don't really know. The autopsy was not fully published because it's still under investigation. So we don't know what caused his death just yet, but we do know that his death certificate officially classifies his death as a homicide now, which is, monumental. They were already investigating as a homicide, but now, that word on a death certificate means absolutely everything to the family at this point.
Yeah, it really does. And when you think about, okay, the results weren't disclosed publicly, but this also gives, if and when there's a trial in the future, and that could be years down the road, but that's evidence that the family now has because they helped pay for this. So that's something that they can present at trial. And trials, you want to preserve as much evidence as possible so that the jury isn't swayed in any way. Right. So that's partly why that's not being disclosed publicly.
Yeah. And so, because that's a really good point. But also, too, just the fact, because before, if there's a question about whether or not how someone died, whether it was suicide or whatever, or what have you, there's not a whole lot you can do in terms of damages, right? So now, this is going to come years down the line, I'm sure of it. But now they're able to file wrongful death lawsuits. They're able to file claims with insurance if he had any insurance. Probably not, but maybe he did. But let's say he had some sort of something that that gave them a little bit of money. They can now do all of that because his death was classified as as a homicide and as something that should not have happened. And completely out of their control. So that's huge, especially for again a family like this. It sounded like they didn't have a whole lot of means. That's going to be life changing for them. And for years they had all this heartbreak, and now they can finally it's not going to fix it, but money certainly helps, right?
Well, and so you say wrongful death lawsuits, things like that's held in civil court, which is different than criminal court.
Yeah.
And the bars are different than what has to be proven in court. So, yes, that will be handled in a different courtroom with a different judge, with different players of the game, essentially.
Right.
But it does open up the doors for it to go down that route if need be.
Yeah. And, again, notably too, if we're not, especially thanks for bringing that up, because if we're, not dealing with the criminal court justices, or judges, then we, and we know who was best friends with those criminal court justices in South Carolina in the Low Country. And so I'm sure that, helps quite a bit too. The fact that that's kind of, moved into a little bit of a different area at that point to help them out a good bit. So that's important, but we do have a whole criminal thing to get to too, because that is the most recent development. And I saw this headline and I was screaming at the top of my lungs, Michelle, because I really didn't think we'd ever get there. But just recently, and just within the last 2 weeks or so, I'll have to look at the date, but the attorneys said that a grand jury has been impaneled to look at this case. And that is, as I know Michelle, the very first step to hand down some criminal charges against somebody, which is monumental. I mean, I can't even begin to put enough weight into that.
Yeah, so the grand jury process is done behind closed doors, but a grand jury is seated. It's a jury of your peers, kind of what this country stands on.
Same representation of a regular jury. Yeah.
Exactly. These folks go in and they sit down, and a district attorney will present the evidence that they have at hand. That grand jury will listen to it. That's not open to the public, so the news is not allowed to be there. Just regular citizens can't go and sit down and watch. Kind of like in a regular courtroom. It's not done like that. But that's how. And then the grand jurors decide if they want to hand down an indictment or not, and that's called a true bill or no true bill. So that's when they decide if they want to hand down charges. And that's also a different way of being charged, separately from like police. So maybe you're in a situation and the police charge you and you go to jail that night. This is like a kind of a secondary process, because sometimes they don't have all the evidence that they need right then and there to charge you, and it has to be taken to the grand jury. Right. So that's kind of the two different ways that you can be charged criminally in our country.
Yeah, and I thought this was interesting, and maybe you can kind of weigh into this a little bit too, because you talk about because I love hearing all your crime expertise, Michelle. Because you talk about it being done in secret, which is so important for so many different reasons. But I'm like, typically you don't even know that a grand jury is even happening. In a lot of different cases, and so it's really interesting that this attorney was able to talk about that so publicly. And like literally, and when I say in secret, I mean it's literally like the prosecution team and the grand jury, and that's it. Like defense attorneys aren't allowed in there. Like they'll bring witnesses in as needed, but like even they can't hear what each other is saying. Like it's like a very behind closed door process. And so I'm wondering though, how that even like comes out, like, and like why he was able to talk about that so much. And so I'm wondering what do you think about that? Because I have a couple of thoughts, but what are your thoughts?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't know how he would have heard. The only thing I can think of is that there's just so much attention and so much interest that could possibly be why. And maybe they want to get ahead of it before maybe some other players in the case might start talking to the media. And that could be handled differently down the road. There could be a judge down the road that hands down a gag order, which prevents everyone from talking about it.
It'll probably happen in this case.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, if there's a case that qualifies, it's certainly this one, right? But I also so my thought, one of the thoughts that crossed into my head was because of the way that this initial investigation kind of played out, in terms of not a whole lot of people, knowing, or speaking up, and so many people like kind of being potentially silenced about what may or may not have happened to Stephen. I'm also wondering too if this is maybe like some sort of tactic on behalf of the state to like put some pressure onto people and to be like, like it's coming. It's been 8 years, but it's finally coming. It's been 8 years next week, by the way. But it's finally coming. So like, that's the only thing that was like maybe this was like some sort of strategic, tactic to be able to do that. So that way, they, maybe they'll start squealing in some way, or come forward or, something. I don't know. I got that kind of feeling that they were like waiting for that one extra thing to kind of shake loose.
Yeah. And if investigators can put a little pressure. Yeah. Absolutely. That could be just enough pressure to get someone to come forward. Yeah, for sure. Say they want to cooperate.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of notes on that front too. So Eric Bland is the attorney we were just talking about. And so he's also the attorney, by the way, who's representing Gloria Satterfield's family, the Murdaugh family housekeeper who died under mysterious circumstances in 2018. He said on lots of different news networks, he said that he believes that substantial progress is being made in this investigation based on what he's been told by SLED and by state investigators. He says, interestingly, that there are probably 5 to 6 individuals that have, quote, material information as to what had happened to Stephen. And he believes that an answer, so probably an indictment, could come by Labor Day. He told the Law and Crime Network that the consensus is that Stephen did die on the road that night. And you remember we were kind of questioning whether he was killed somewhere somewhere else or left there. But he says that the consensus is that he did die there and that he didn't die somewhere else. But the question, as a question that we all have, is what caused his death, of how this all kind of played out. And he also said that and this was as of I believe a week ago, he told Court TV that subpoenas are being issued and that warrants are still being executed up until that point, anyways.
So they're working.
Oh,
I mean, they're busy. They're not taking any days off. It's not summertime in that office, and they've got work to do.
Yeah, and and a lot of that I feel like has to come down to the journalists, to the people, to the crime lovers of the world who saw this case and said something's not right about that, and spoke up, and and did not shut up, and frankly, actually leave all those people out of it. That the credit to that goes down to Sandy, frankly, because she did not stop talking for years and years and years and years and years until someone finally heard her. And so a lot of that it has to come down to her, because otherwise at some point all this stuff would have went away. So
yeah, and the point of the consensus that Stephen did die on the road and didn't die somewhere else, that is important, because when you're trying to narrow down and you're trying to piece together an investigation, you have to answer all questions possible. So if you can rule out didn't die somewhere else, died on the road, that helps point your investigation into a direction, and that's a lot of what these investigators and lawyers and people involved are doing, is trying to rule out the noise and the other things that it can't be, so they can focus on what it can be and see what that theory looks like.
Yeah, and too, so the specificity that you're talking about there is really, really important, because I mean, at the end of the day, if you can lay out all of the motive and opportunity that you want, but if you can't say for sure how you believe this person died, I mean, you don't have a case, right? Because who's to say that sure, you have the motive, you have the opportunity, but but how the heck did they do it? You don't know. You can't figure that stuff out. So it's so important. That's so important to be able to figure that out.
And those are some of the hardest cases that, if prosecutors take cases to trial, if you don't have a body, or if you don't have the means of how it happened, because that's what juries want. They want as much evidence as possible so that they can make the best educated guess that they can make.
Yeah, beyond a shadow of a doubt, right?
Exactly. That's a high bar. That's a very high bar. And so the more information, the more scientific information that you can give to a jury, that's what they want, because they're going to feel confident in making that verdict.
Yeah. Well, and two, so I think a suspect, obviously, I mean, that's place one, right, to be able to go to say, hey, this person did this. And so, interestingly, this blew my mind. We were just talking about this. Two people, according to a report by Fitz News, they got a hold of a whole bunch of documents related to this case somehow. But they said that two people were named as persons of interest in multiple different SLED reports. And so those people are named, and you're not going to recognize these names, but there are Patrick Wilson and Sean Connolly. They're both at this point 25 years old. And they live just a few miles from the crime scene. And interestingly enough, so we didn't name their names, but we did talk about them in episode 11. So Patrick, if you remember, a investigator got a call from a man who said that his son had said that his friend had admitted to his stepson that he killed Stephen Smith. That he hit him with his car. This is how this all played out. He admitted it to him, and so I guess he went and told his stepdad, and he called this into police. So that stepson is Patrick Wilson, and that friend is Sean Connolly. And those are the people who I guess in passing to investigators told them that the reason that they called it into police was because Randy Murdaugh, Alec Murdaugh's older brother, told him to call this into police. And so that's how all this happened. And interest, so this is like kind of a little bit of a side, but I think it ends up being relevant at the end. So I guess maybe hold on to this a little bit, Michelle. But so interestingly at the time, so Patrick was facing attempted murder charges for an incident that I know nothing about. There was nothing out there about this attempted murder charge. But interestingly, so the charges right after this accident were, right after this call, were dropped by the solicitor who employed, by the way, none other than Alec Murdaugh at the time. And it's really not clear at this point at whether Alec was like an actual like employee of the solicitor's office, or if like, because if you remember, like there was like the whole thing about like Alec just like walking around with the badge, but like no longer being employed with them. Not really totally 100% clear like what that timeline was, but that's the same office. And then also too, so after all of this, Randy Murdaugh ended up filing 2 motor vehicle accident lawsuits against Sean, who has like a bunch of different like DUI charges and stuff, which were eventually both dropped by a judge at some point. And I also was reading a lot about how I guess those judges have like direct ties to the Murdaugh family of like just being buddies, but like there were also like every single judge in this district is like buddies with the Murdaugh. So like, I don't really know how much you can read into that, but that's how it happened. And so,
yeah,
just a lot of like, circular stuff and like, potential backdoor deals being made, and it all just kind of looks weird. And especially, and like, again, I would have discounted every single thing on this list except for the fact that they showed up on the SLED report as persons of interest in all this, which is crazy to me. So
It really is, and I think it just kind of is another tally mark under the side of something doesn't sound right here.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because if there's nothing to hide, then why wouldn't it be documented correctly?
Oh, right.
Why wouldn't it be easy to piece together? Why wouldn't it be easy to prove or disprove?
Right,
you know what
right.
I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I will say too, so at the time they were minors in all of this, Patrick and Sean, so like maybe that has something to do with it. It's all just very weird. And it just all like seeps right into like the Murdaugh family, of these deals that they make and the connections that they have and like the power that they use to be able to get what they want and to protect the name and all that stuff. And, if they, I don't know, I see like my brain is just going with like theories and possibilities of like how this could have all played out if indeed Patrick and Sean were indeed involved. And you also said something too, Michelle, right before we got on the podcast, which now is now striking me because you said something, because when I said, oh, like these are the 2 people, you were like, oh, those are the 2 guys in the truck. Because if you remember, Steven said that he was told, I can't remember his name, but the guy he was seeing or not seeing, that he was being followed by 2 guys in the truck the day he died. So I mean that tracks, right?
Yeah, I mean it would if we could confirm, what were they driving? I mean, yeah, it could, because wasn't it like a dark colored truck? It was a very, very vague description.
Yeah.
But if it fits, it could, that could line up.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I mean, also, too, I mean, I think, again, we are talking about, like, the low country in South Carolina, so I'm sure there are a lot of trucks on the road, so, like
I know,
maybe not, but, yeah, so I think there's a lot of possibilities there, and also, too, to be clear, persons of interest does not necessarily mean that they're a suspect. Persons of interest could just mean that they are, that the police just want to talk to them more, need more questions answered, but, like, it doesn't necessarily have to result in actual charges.
Yeah, they just want to talk to you. They just want to, see what you were doing that day, where you were coming, where you were going, who you were with, what you saw, what you didn't see, what you heard,
All the questions. I
just want to talk to you.
Yeah, right. So I'd be curious to see like how successful they were in like tracking them down. I mean, I'm sure if the stepfather calls it into police, I'm sure it can't be that hard. But yeah, so the last piece of this whole thing that I do have to talk about, and has nothing to do with Stephen Smith, but it has to do with Alec Murdaugh. But it's another one of the Murdaugh cases that has absolutely kept me up at night. It broke my heart. It has to do with Gloria Satterfield, the 2018 mysterious death. We talked about it before. Crazily enough, Alec Murdaugh responded to a fraud lawsuit from jail that was filed by the Nautilus Insurance Company. And again, this is like a whole different realm, but just to like kind of sum it up. So when Gloria died, the family reached a settlement deal with Alec, and he said, okay, yeah, sure, I'll pay this amount of money because it was on my property, whatever. But the Satterfield family said like they never saw a penny of that. And so there was like a whole thing about that go read that for yourself, frankly. So basically, he said that he admitted in official response to the lawsuit, he said he admitted that he owes the insurance company millions of dollars after he claimed he reached a settlement with Gloria's family. He also admitted that he lied about his dogs causing Satterfield's fall to force his insurance to make a settlement payment. Again, because if this is all an accident, they're more likely to pay. If he had something to do with their death, probably not. He said that the money from the settlement went to an account that he owed on, which again is how this whole thing began, rather than to the Satterfield family. And so he says that he basically admits to committing fraud. I mean, that's fraud 101. You say money's going here and money actually goes here. That is the definition of fraud. So, I mean, I guess he's paying his amends in jail. So.
And I think also, lying that his dogs didn't cause the fall.
And he never said what actually did, by the way. So. Yeah.
So there's still a question mark there, but he understands, I think, kind of already, just given the trial that's already happened, his credibility has kind of already been shot.
Zero. Yeah.
So he's just kind of already, I think he knows that that's not going for him. So, but as far as kind of where he plans on this going, I don't really know. Is he, because I feel like if he was fully coming clean, wouldn't he just say the whole story? I mean, what do you have to lose at this point?
Right.
Yeah,
it also, it does kind of give me vibes of like, because another thing that I didn't even mention in all this is that he's also being deposed or was deposed for the boat crash too, which is, I mean, the boat crash that killed Mallory Beach. And so he, there was no like accusations that he was ever there, but like we all know that Paul was there. And so that's really interesting. And so it does kind of give me a little bit of like, okay, like I'll give you this, right? Like I'll own up about all of this. I'll give you as much as I can give you about this one piece of the puzzle. So that way I can get a little bit of leniency on the double murder, on the, botched murder suicide, on the boat crash, on the Gloria Satterfield death, maybe on the Stephen Smith stuff, you know what I mean? And so like, that's kind of what I'm getting out of all this, is that it's just like trying to buy some brownie points here.
Well, and I think also when you've grown up in a family that has power and all you know is power, and when you've literally lost everything and this is the only thing that you can hold on to, you're still exercising that power.
Yeah. Well,
you?
Yeah, that's so true. And I was thinking that too, because like all he's ever known in his entire life is you give me this, I'll give you this. And so like that, I mean, old habits die hard, right? And so you're definitely right about that a little bit of like maybe he is just trying to play his game still, because he's played games his whole life. His parents played games their whole lives. Their parents played games their whole lives. And so he's still playing those legal games, I guess. So, man, when it never ends, it's never going to end. It's never going to end. We have a couple more updates up our sleeves, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think like looking forward to Labor Day. I mean, I am so on my seat, like just waiting to see kind of what's going to happen with Stephen Smith, and who knows, we could be doing another one of these updates here in a couple months.
We definitely will. I'll have you on anytime, Michelle. And also when I heard Labor Day, I was like, Labor Day? I was like, really? I was like, on 4th of July. Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about, but also too, because we're talking about our update episodes. It's the third update episode of Down on a Case so far. So this is your reminder, at home, if wherever you're listening right now, turn on notifications, because whenever we have more information to give you about a case that we've already covered, like we're going to drop in. It's not going to be on a Wednesday. It's going to be on some random day, because I know that you guys want it as soon as possible. And so turn on your notifications. That way you can get it as soon as possible too, because it'll tell you when we drop a new episode. And again, it's not going to be on a regular week. I don't want you guys to miss a thing about these cases, because I know I don't want to miss a thing about these cases. I know Michelle doesn't want to miss a thing about these cases, and so we want you just as caught up as we are.
Yeah, I mean, the Newshound knows never stop sniffing.
Oh, no. And speaking of Newshound, so Michelle, last time we talked, you were in a little bit of a different place, and so I want to give you the opportunity to plug your news situation, and to plug your digital worlds and your online stuff. So tell everyone what you got going on right now.
Yeah, so last time we talked, I had stepped away from news for a little bit, and I have stepped back into news since we did our last episode, and so I am now a morning anchor at Local 3 News in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I love it. It feels so good being back. It's been about 2 months now, waking up really early in the morning. that 2 a.m. alarm, it's not that bad, but it's okay. I'm actually up past my bedtime right now, but I don't work tomorrow, so that's okay. But no, I've loved seeing Liam again, and he actually just left me a whole great big thing of files. I need to take a picture of it and tweet it. But speaking of Twitter, if you want to follow me, I'm at Michelle Local 3 News, and so you can follow me there. You can also search me on Facebook, Michelle Heron Local 3. I'm on there. I'm on the LinkedIn. I'm on all of it. So, yeah.
Well, Chattanooga is so much better now that you're back in the mix. And so I'm so happy for you to do that. And so, drop Michelle a line and tell her about all these cases that you need a little bit of attention to, that you want her to take a look at. She's your gal. So we're so excited to have Michelle back, and we're so excited for the whole area is so excited to have you back on, having your eyes on things. And so that's a good thing. So
it's been so welcoming, and that's been really heartwarming.
Yeah, excellent. So speaking of Stephen Smith, just one more time. So since all of this kind of came back into the news within the last, year or two. Eric Bland, the attorney, said that they have received more than 40 tips to the official SLED investigators that have helped them really drive home this investigation. And right now they are offering a $35,000 reward for information. So if you know anything about the death of Stephen Smith, call SLED, the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, at 803-737-9000, or the Crime Stoppers of the Low Country at 843-554-1111. And we're also going to put that number on our website and in our show notes too.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, Michelle, it's been such a pleasure having you back on. We will have you back on so soon. But in the meantime, if you all are just, dying for, more crime over wine, and are just wondering how you can tell everyone and every other person about this podcast, the best way to do that is to leave us a 5-star review and a rating wherever you are listening to us right now. But in the meantime, we are just going to have to see you for a regularly scheduled episode this coming Wednesday.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.